And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Power Hour podcast. Today, I've got an incredible guest joining me, someone who's made huge waves with the Power Hours through the Power Platform space. He's laughing at me because I said that, but you will get to understand why. He has one of the most impressive architectural track records I've come across, and after stalking him for a lengthy amount of time, I've seen the incredible work that he's done. He's a fast-track recognized solution architect, a director, and an all-round expert when it comes to navigating the Power Platform. EY Kalman, welcome to the show.
It's really wonderful to be on here, and I don't think I deserve quite all of those accolades that you just bestowed upon me. So blushing slightly here.
Absolutely love it, EY. I guess a question I wanted to ask you, because like I said, you've made such waves within the Power Platform space, and like I said, I stalked your LinkedIn, and you've had so many interesting kind of experiences. So how did it all kind of start, and how did it kind of come along towards the Power Platform space?
Wow. So how did I dip my toes into sort of biz apps to start off with?
That sounds like a great place to start. Yeah.
So it was in my early 20s. I was back from having studied abroad. I was doing IT before I went abroad to study. So whilst in school, I was selling computers with permission to teachers and family and friends in the community, and building in the days when you used to build your own computer, get components, shove it together. You don't do that anymore, right? Gone abroad to study for about 3.5 years, come back, trying to pick that up again, but it wasn't really doing what I was wanting it to do, and the scale of it and such, and realized that it was just something that it wasn't going to work. Um, and it was about April time or so, and we had family friends come over for lunch at the weekend, and was talking to them, and they was working in technology. They'd actually just done a management buyout. They were a tech outfit for a much larger consultancy. It was an accountants. Right, so I say consultancy, right? Accountants, right? Tried to spice that up a
Hmm.
bit. We say consultancy for an accountancy firm, and they'd done a management buyout of their particular unit, and they were looking for an IT guy. And I went, well, I'm looking for something. So I went into interview. Did an interview with the family friend. He recused himself, obviously. Went into interview, and they're like, we need somebody to run our in-house network. We're a small company. We've got like 8, 9 people, taking care of the computers, doing the software for it. And we're also going to need somebody to train and support on our solution. I went, great. And they said, have you heard of CRM? I went, not a clue. And they went, do you know what SQL Server is? And I went, not a clue. They said, okay, what do you know? So we talked about it anyway. They offered me a job. I walked out. I went across the road. For people in the UK familiar with WH Smith, for people not familiar with it, it's a very well-known high street book chain, bookseller, fiction, non-fiction, reference materials and such. And I went into it. There was one just across the road, and I bought the Dummies Guide to CRM and the Dummies Guide to SQL Server. And that's where I started off. Back in the day, 3.0, on-premise, all the joys of things like that. And over the years, this has gone into cloud and democratized with the Power Platform, because we used to do things with Dynamics 3, well, even before Dynamics 365, when it was still Dynamics CRM, that the product was built for. We bastardized it, where everybody was doing it. But with the democratization of the technology, when Power Platform was launched, 2017, early stuff in 2018, and coming into 2019 and going in GA and stuff, it was just the next step. We now had Lego bricks we could play with and being able to do things. So I've gone from end user, I've done a bit of contracting, and been in the Microsoft partner space since late 2018, early 2019. So now about 6, 7 years ago or so. Wow, time
Yeah.
flies.
Super interesting. I love that. And I'm always interested in people who started with the first kind of early editions of the CRM, even before it was Dynamics. Because I know this might sound weird to you, EY, but it was always the Power Platform for me. It was never a kind of early edition. So, what are some lessons that you've kind of taken from then all the way up until now, when you kind of see almost patterns that where you're like, oh, I've seen this before, evolutions in the technology, those sorts of things. Are there any lessons you've taken from that you use in your day to day?
Um, yes, never take anything for granted.
Love it.
Just because Microsoft provides a functionality doesn't mean it's going to remain there. Just because you've been asking Microsoft for years for something and they haven't done it doesn't mean they're suddenly going to swoop in. I mean, back in the day, we used a lot of third-party solutions, right?
Mm,
Filtered lookups in model-driven apps. It's there now, right? I remember when it wasn't. I remember when it first
mm,
came in. There used to be an ISV based out of Germany. It was called Stunware. They did a solution for possibly even 1.2, but definitely 3.0 and 4.0 and 2011. Everybody used it. You couldn't do that. And then Microsoft suddenly went, oh, we've been listening to you now. For 10 years, you've been asking for this, and they rolled it in product. Then again, there are other things which were around then, which they've rolled out of product. Advanced find, you can't do that anymore because of the way that things work. So everything evolves, usually, hopefully, for the better, sometimes not so much for the better. And that's when you hear people in the community moan and complain really publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that before. And yeah, I feel like the community in the Power Platform is extraordinarily loud when it comes to it, and all for the better as well in that case. So I think that's awesome. I guess, kind of around your career and, where you are now as a fast track recognized solution architect. I believe I got that right.
Yep.
What was the process like kind of getting to that point? Because I feel like this is kind of a recognition people don't hear so much about, but I feel like in the Power Platform space, and please tell me if I'm wrong, it's definitely one of the highest recognized recognitions out there. So could you let the people know kind of what that means and how they can get there for themselves if they want to?
Sure. So you're right, there's not that much publicity about it. I had no idea what it was when I first heard about it about 3 to 4 years ago or so. It is something which Microsoft is trying to get better publicity on. I'm actually doing some work together with the Microsoft teams to try and get better publicity for it. I blog about it occasionally and talk about it and such. The way that Mark Smith, NZ365 guy, the one and only Mark Smith, right, talks about it, was he described to me a few years back was he considers it to be the gold standard for solution architects. Because people can say they're a solution architect, right? And you have no idea how good the quality is or isn't. Now, I was doing solution architect for a couple of years, and he started referring to myself officially as solution architect when I actually passed the PL 600. And the solution architect exam can say, hey, there's a piece of paper. But again, a piece of paper doesn't actually mean the exam is not actually properly solution architecture for it. So it's how do you know if somebody actually knows their stuff? And there are serious legends out there who have been FTRSAs many more years than I have since it was launched in about 5-6 years ago or so. So essentially, it's Microsoft themselves, various teams with Microsoft and with engineering, review a project that you have done, or multiple projects. So the process, which I can talk about because it's fine, it's public for it, is every year there's a window which opens up for applications and you can apply. You need to meet certain criteria. So you need to be working for a Microsoft partner. They relaxed the criteria this past year. You don't need to be a gold partner anymore, or the solution designation. So you can actually be a small partner because they recognize that you can have some very good architects, but very small niche consultancies. So that was a very positive move forward, in my opinion. It needs to be enterprise scale. So you're talking about something that's larger than 1,000 users, for instance, or a variety of other ones. There are actually 4 categories. So there's Dynamics 365 customer engagement, so the front office app, sales, customer service. There's the ERP space. Then there's Power Platform in terms of Power Apps and Power Automate. So 4 different categories that you can be awarded across multiple of the categories. It's at the same time. So depending on what you're going in, the requirements will be there. So for instance, as a Power Automate FTRSA, it's about having RPA together with Power Automate Cloud Flows. So RPA and DPA together at scale. And there are metrics around what it needs to be. So once you've confirmed for yourself that you've actually met those metrics, you then submit information. And you need to submit architectural reference diagrams. You need to show how you're going in line with Microsoft best practices. You can anonymize who the client is. I usually say it's only Microsoft internal who's going to review it, so they technically have access to it anyway. They're not actually going into the live system to poke around, but they go and review it. If they think that what you've done is on point, it meets the bar, you then progress to the interview step. And then you get grilled. But I have to say, usually interviews, whether it's interviews like this is casual, it's great, but job interviews, right? I'm at my 4th partner in 6 years. Work partner, not life partner, right? I've only got one wife. I only got one wife.
Love it. Appreciate it.
Today. Yes, dear, I said that, right? Life, I don't mind that. Because we joke about these sort of things. So job interviews I find quite relaxing. It's about seeing a fit. You can talk about experience, right? But I was so nervous In fact, I actually reached out to the team pre-interview to ask what was expected my first year, because I was just so nervous, because you're talking to the people who actually build the technology.
Oh yeah.
Usually you can turn around. I joke, you've got two solution architects washed up on a desert island. By the end of the first year, they've got 3 boats.
Yeah.
There's the boat that each of them built, and there's the boat they built together as a collaboration. And all 3 are different because we have different views and we can argue for it. Arguing with the people who build this stuff for it is a different perspective, because they'll go, that's not why we built it. That's not the way it should be used. It's like, you can't argue with this. You could try and argue, but so it was, I probably built it up to be a bit more stressful in my mind than it actually was, but they grill you, they go through it, and then they review internally how it goes, like a job interview process. And what comes out of it is, if they think that you've passed that bar, then you get awarded. Well, they tell you, and then you have to keep quiet for a couple of months before it goes public. And that happens every year. It's an annual award for it. Now, in terms of I can't tell you how many people apply for it each year, right? I don't know the metrics. I don't think there are tens of thousands. But I know that at the moment, as when we're recording live now, there are about 110 FTRSAs globally across all 4 of the capabilities. Power Apps has about 55 or 60. Power Automate has, I think, about 10 or so. Dynamics 365 has about 30, and the rest of the ERP. So it is a small club. We do not really get any benefits from Microsoft. We get a lovely little trophy. We get on quarterly calls with leadership, whereby we can give responses and we can engage with leadership to give real client feedback. But it's really about those people who are very hands-on with the technology. So it's people who are in the delivery space. Now, some are more in the delivery space, some are less in the delivery space. It's not something that's usually given to pre-sales or salespeople, for instance, because it's about actually implementation of technology rather than a proposed one. So you need to be actually hands-on with it. And I think it's really good. I think it's a really good program. I think it's evolving nicely. I know through my engagement with the team of some of the vision that they have for it and where they want to get to with it. And as I've said to them, it's an iterative process. It's not a big bang approach, but it's definitely something that Microsoft is seeing value in, because for 2 reasons. Number one, they get feedback as to actual client stuff that's going on at clients. And number 2, and I'm not saying this from a biased perspective that I'm an FTRSA, but the aim of it is to be, if you're a customer, you want to be in the safest pair of hands possible. And how do you know that the people you're talking to, the architects who are going to be working on your project, are actually good at what they do? And this is, in essence, a vetting of that. Now, sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes it's a bit less. It's, just because you've done one project brilliantly and you've used that as an example doesn't mean every project you're going to do is brilliant. But the aim of it is to reassure the customer, vet people, review them to check that what they're doing is actually on par, and that customers can see it as a safer pair of hands in terms of experience. But we don't know everything. I am not an Azure architect. I work in the biz app space, Dynamics 365 CE Power Platform. So although I use Azure components, if you would ask me an esoteric question about Azure Service Bus, for instance, I'll say I need to pull in an architect for that. I don't do Azure design things, and obviously large ecosystems require multiple architects on it.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned the benefits there, and you mentioned how organizations, when they hire a fast-track recognized solution architect, in some respects, they know that they're getting the best. Because, like you said, and like Mark Smith said, it's probably the gold standard of the Power Platform certifications. What does that mean from a monetary perspective for people trying to pursue this? Because obviously, as we know, generally people tend to pay more for the best. So is this something that people can look at? Is it something people should be looking at? What are your opinions on it?
My opinion would be, don't chase it just because you're wanting to switch role and get paid more. If you're in role and you're doing well and you apply for it, and it's not a certification, it is an award. So just to point that out, it's not a certification.
Yes.
And if you are awarded it, you could conceptually turn around and go, hey, look, I've been recognized by Microsoft and I now have access into Microsoft leadership to be able to help them better. Hold on one moment, sorry.
Nice.
One of the kids just wanted to say goodnight. So you could use it as saying, look, I'm more valuable to you as an organization. As a partner, I'm a safer pair of hands. When going into, if you're switching role and you already have it, again, you could say, look, you've got architects out there, you've been recognized for it. I wouldn't expect it to be a massive uplift in salary, to be honest. Again, just because you've done it great once doesn't mean you're going to do it great again. My wife points this out to me with IKEA furniture when I'm assembling, that I say, I did it great last time. She said, yeah, but you could always screw up again because of previous stuff. So it can be, it's an additional sort of arrow in the quiver, but it's not the, hey, look at me, I'm a fast track recognized solution architect, you need to pay me double the next solution architect for it, because there are a lot of great solution architects out there who are not fast track. Let's face it, not everybody wants to go through the process. Not everybody knows of the process. Not everybody can be bothered to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your experience, EY, what separates the good solution architects from the greats within the Power Platform space?
This may be slightly controversial, but it's not just about biz apps. It's not just about Power Platform. It's about understanding the wider ecosystem, so within Azure. So although I'm not an Azure architect, I know enough about a variety of Azure components to take a look at it and spec what's needed. And nowadays, it's also veering more towards the third-party technologies. So for instance, integrating with things like, Salesforce, Oracle, or AWS, or Google, or G-Cloud, the Google offering for it. It's about understanding how it goes. It's not an enterprise architect. I want to be clear on that. It's not about enterprise architecture, but it's about understanding. If all you work in is just the biz app space and you have no interest in outside of it, you create a great system, but generally at scale, you're needing to understand about integrations. You're going to use Azure components. You're going to need to know about messaging. You're going to need to know about auditing and compliance and governance in the wide M365 space with Copilot now and all the various Copilots, authentication. You need to know a lot about the Microsoft ecosystem. Again, not an enterprise architect, but you need to know enough about it that you can essentially hold your own when talking to customers, at least at a high level, to say then, this is a high level view. Let me go get somebody who's more of an expert, but I can give you a flavor of it. Because that's where it plays. If you're just creating Power Apps and you're in Dataverse and you're not looking at virtual tables and a variety of other things, you can be an amazing architect, but you're probably not quite up there for fast track.
Yeah, understood. And let's say for those people who want to be those great architects, how can they go about learning those skills, integration, etc.? Because right now all I can find is Microsoft Learn, and we all know kind of the story behind that. So how can people level up those skills?
So Microsoft Learn is a good starting point, right? It's getting iteratively better over the years. There are still challenges and problems with it, I know, right? I'm a Microsoft certified trainer as well, and an MCT community lead, so we engage with the teams for it and such, and I know it's not the best it can be. Be curious. If you're on a project, right, and again, we're talking about projects at scale. Projects, in the micro level is important as well, but, when you're on sort of the more macro scale project, ask. Go talk to the people, go talk to the Azure people, go talk to your data people, go talk to your AI people in the team, in the wider project space, and find out what is going on and what's needed. I always say that we should try and learn something new each and every day, whether it's, small or large. It's important to keep learning. And it's not just about the capabilities of the platform. You need to know it, but, what one example, and I use this in general interviews. This isn't what I necessarily expect of just an architect. I expect this of anybody who's at least a mid-level developer. And, in using automation, I go, what are the differences between Power Automate and Logic Apps and classic workflow? Like, you need to start learning, not just within your space, but about the wider space. So you ask people, right, how do you scale things up? Is it going to work for 1,000 records a day? Is it going to work for 1 million records a day? Is it going to work for 50 million records a day? Is it going to work for 10 users? Is it going to work for 500,000 users? Work on the scalability, because especially as you scale, you're going to need to know more about the stuff that sits outside of the platform.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said, EY, I think Microsoft Learn is the best starting point. And honestly, I don't see too many more resources out there personally.
They're on for this, but also reach out. I mean, I've had people ping me with questions about Fast Track and about architecture for it. Find yourself a mentor. In fact, find yourself more than one mentor. We are all busy, we know this, but we're part of the community. I, on average, have between 2 to 3 mentors at any given point in time, some of which I'm checking in with frequently, some less frequently. And find yourself a mentor if you're interested in that enterprise scale, somebody who has been there, done it, whether they're fast track recognized or not, and ask them, how can I learn about this? Can you share some of your experiences with me? Generally, people are quite eager to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I definitely second that. I think finding mentors for me has been like one of the things that have kept me going through these years. So yeah, highly recommend that. And EY, I don't know about you, but when I'm on Microsoft Learn, I feel like if I'm not going towards something, I feel like it's almost a pit of knowledge. Like you go into one link, then you're in another link, then you're in another link.
Yeah.
So there's an argument to be made around certifications, but I personally think they ground me because I have something I'm going for. I know what the criteria is. I know what to read to kind of get there. Are there any specific certifications someone can take to develop those Azure kind of skills to complement the Power Platform skills that they have now?
There are numerous Azure certifications. I have not taken really any of those. I have taken, I think, the AI 102 or something, which was an introduction to AI usage within Azure, but I took that just because I was curious for it. Again, being an Azure architect is a different skill set. That's almost an, enterprise architecture needed. Just be curious, find out what's needed. And you're right, you click on one link and then another link, and then all of a sudden you've got 100 tabs open and your browser is crashing or complaining it's going to crash. I dip in and out of Learn, and usually I take examples from the projects that I'm running and that I'm on and overseeing, and I go and research about it. I'll bring an example yesterday, right? We have a data team on a client project that's using Fabric. Great stuff. I've started to take it out. Fabric, again, an example. Yes, it's new and shiny. It's important to know the capabilities. And they're looking to push data into Dataverse using Fabric Data Factory, which is an upgraded version of Azure Data Factory, but it's now a new... Anyway, let's not talk, right? And it's creating records. Great. It needs to populate lookups. I'm like, okay, fine. You can pass in. We've got foreign keys. You can pass in foreign keys, right? We can do this, right? We upload stuff through Excel, through front, and we can do foreign keys. Turns out I can't do that programmatically. Fabric link to Dataverse and something in Dataverse as well doesn't allow it. Just like, right, go to research that. Go find some information. Learn didn't have much on it. Third-party blogs had. I pinged a couple of people at Microsoft who I happen to know. But I went to research it so I could come back to the client and say, this is a workaround. This is what we need to go and do. So find the challenges, find the problems. Especially scalability is really important. If you're building a solution for 5 people, it's an RPA process that runs once a month that takes 30 seconds to carry out. It could be really great, but the fast track recognition is about that enterprise scale. So you need to, get on enterprise projects, essentially. Or if you're not on there, ask people. Even if you're in a small partner, you're not working on those, you're probably more limited. But, go and talk to people about the experience and learn from them.
Interesting. And that actually opens up for the other question I had. So I feel like a lot of people in the Power Platform, at least the ones that I've spoken to, they almost feel stuck in the regard where they started off as citizen developers, building normal Canvas apps that connect to SharePoint lists and then have a Power Automate flow that bounce between them. I know that's how I started. I don't know, that's how a lot of people fall in love with the system. Obviously, after that, there's a steep learning curve, especially if you don't have an IT or computing or, programming background. How do people break out of that shell from smaller internal projects to almost external enterprise projects, as you've mentioned?
If you are working internally in an organization, you're going to need to find larger projects. So you may be using for your own skill set, great, and playing around. The example I use is golf or some, tennis or some sport that people do, right? You build in golf track or you build your own expense tracker. Go and find a business need, right? Come up with a solution, come up with a proof of concept. Understand what Dataverse is, very importantly. We're not going to go down the licensing thing and the adoption stuff, right? We all know of the struggles and challenges, but understand proper relational databases. That's Dataverse, which is not just a database, of course. It's got lots of other auditing and security and logic and so on and so forth built into it. But understand how it works and go and build a proof of concept for a business need. And then show it to your manager. Find out if your company has a team who are working on Power Platform. Say, hey, can I get a look? And I've done some stuff. Can I demo some stuff to you that I've built for myself? Maybe you could do. Samit Saini, Heathrow, the London Heathrow story for it, right?
Heard of it.
He was a security guard. I know him. Great mate of mine, right? actually overdue for a meetup. I was messaging him at the weekend to say, hey, we need to meet up. Um, he was the security guard at Central Search, and this was before the whole proper Power Platform, right? M3, it was still Office 365 and the first thing of Power Apps, and he built something, and now he leads the team. So you can really pivot career with that. If you're working in consultancy, then you're probably not quite a maker. We don't really call citizen developers, right? You're probably not quite a maker. So, again, work on it. Go talk to different people on the team that you're on. Talk to them, find out what's happening. What are they doing with it? Lots of YouTube videos. I'm so many YouTube videos that are out there that are unbelievable for it in terms of building and different stuff for it. I'm not going to mention any specific names because they are really all great. You go onto YouTube, you type in how to do the even most esoteric thing, you're going to have dozens of results. So have that learning mindset. If you can expose to it and you do a bit on your own time as well, yes, that's what it takes. But doing a proof of concept for something and demoing it, and then somebody likes it and goes, hey, can you come onto this? Can you shadow me with this? Can you help me with that? What's your opinion on it? Can you build something? Again, there's also, in the consultancy space, do you want to become a developer? So you're actually building. Do you want to become a functional consultant? So you're configuring through the front end, but you're probably not doing much proper build. Do you want to become, more business analyst? What is the route? There are various different routes which people can take as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been wanting to ask you about governance for a while, actually. So let's talk about let's talk about Power Platform governance, because I feel like it's an interesting topic. Let's say there's few organizations that have this luxury, but let's say there's a clean slate, clean Power Platform, nothing going on, just a bunch of there's a war zone going on the default environment, and that's about it. There's no other environments kind of spun up. What is your first point of action in that scenario?
You need to ensure that you have people who know what the platform is capable of. So you set up your center of excellence, and we're not talking about the toolkit here. The toolkit is great and such for it, but it's a starter. But it's in the name. It's a starter toolkit. You need to have people. You need to be involved with IT, so you don't have shadow IT. You need people who can control and, from an executive level, give direction and orders for how to use things, right? Because you need to be able to move ahead with that rather than struggle. So once you've got that, then you need to work out what your data is. And we're not going to be talking about here about licensing stuff. We're going to assume everybody is, going to be licensed and things like that, right? Licensing is a different battle, which we'll go into. You set up environment strategy, development, UAT, integration, pre-prod, production. You work out, do you need multiple production environments or not? Does data need to be segregated? What are the connectors that are allowed to be used? Set up your DLP policies as well for it, and that will also affect your environment strategy. But that starts allowing you control over your data and control over your users in terms of security. That is just the first step. There's a lot of other things, but I would say ensure that you know what your data is. Lock down your default environment as much as possible. Put alerting on it. Immediately somebody uses it, then they get a lovely little email that says you are using an unauthorized resource or whatever it is, and notify. Move off the default. Move into proper environments. Ensure that your data is secure.
Yeah.
And your users are secure. Not past that, but that's step one, which I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of on the concept of governance, so I'm sure you're very experienced, you've seen a lot. What is the worst governance mistake someone can make?
What is the worst governance mistake? Assuming that people will do the right thing.
That's a good one.
Is probably and putting people in charge who have no clue. The two probably go together. Because you assume even though if they've got no clue that they will do the right thing. It's very, very dangerous. Data is the most valuable thing any organization has. Data leakage, the penalties for it from a regulatory perspective in certain verticals, financial, medical, government, right, is unbelievable. So I'm a big fan of you only lock people down when needed, but you need to ensure that you have that. You build sort of a holistic framework that governs people, but gives freedom within to allow people to individually express or as in terms of business functions to flex as needed.
Yeah,
There will always be edge
absolutely.
cases, but treat them as edge cases.
Yeah, that's awesome. And honestly, that's why I fell in love with the platform, because I do come from a software programming business background. That's what I studied in university. But the barrier to entry was so slim that I was like, okay, this can cause problems, but it can also kind of generate efficiency that I don't think we've seen before, at least within Microsoft space. So that's personally why I gravitated towards it. I think it's super important people understand data, to put it very simply, when they're starting off in the Power Platform. So, EY, do people need to know everything about data, or do they just need to know the fundamentals? How are you feeling about kind of the role of data within the Power Platform and where people should start?
So I'm going to throw this question back to you. When you say to people need to know everything about data, can you clarify that a bit more?
Yes, absolutely. So when I say everything about data, I mean, so I feel like within the Power Platform space, we don't really share the same day-to-day tasks as a data analyst, right? People who work in Microsoft Fabric, people who work with Power BI on a day-to-day. So I guess that being that the extreme scale and then being knowing absolutely nothing about data, I guess my question was, where does someone fall within that scale, and how much should they know about these concepts?
So I would turn around and go and respond with the following. Data is very important. In terms of querying of data, Fabric and all the rest of that, right, and Power BI, I wouldn't expect somebody to worry about that as their day-to-day, hour-to-hour worry. However, people do need to understand about data modeling, right? There is normalization of data, there is under-normalization, there is over-normalization, and I have seen all three. And that's where you get experienced architects, especially when you're talking about the scalability of things and the integration between different systems as to how much do you normalize and what are the patterns of normalization that you put in play. But it's not just flat records, and it's not every single attribute is a separate table. There's rhyme and reason for different patterns of usage. But understanding you can normalize the data and have that, individuals are contact records, organizations are account records. You've got activity records, you want to create something bespoke, then fine. How do you model it? And data modeling is very, very important. Coupled with that is security. Because based on how your organization is going to be using it, you could have a really simple organization or you could have one that's really, really complex, all depend on your data modeling as well. The tables that you're creating, do you need to separate out from a security perspective? So you have tables that cannot be viewed by certain types of users? Or do you use column level security on records, and what's the impact from it from a performance point of view and from a configuration and handling point of view? So the two most important things about data, I would say, are the data modeling and understanding how it goes, and that can flex based on the requirements, but security goes hand in hand with that based on the security requirements.
EY, you've seen a lot, as you've mentioned. You've learned nowadays not to take things for granted, especially what Microsoft give us. Does the Power Platform have a future from what you've seen?
Yes, absolutely. There is a major space globally for low code. We've seen this with the Power Platform. I remember when they launched it and they went 500 million apps by 2025. Right, it was Satya had it and all the rest of people had it on their slides and their presentations for it, right? 2 years ago, that dropped off the slide. 2023, that dropped off. And the reason why was 500 million wasn't going to cut it. Although I did say that's very app focused and it was about ecosystem, right? You don't just focus on specific apps. It is a need. Businesses are needing to do more with less budget, with less people. But there is a niche that it fills, and it's not for the use of everything. I turn around, I'm very open about it to account managers and to salespeople, and I go, I will qualify out as quickly as possible. I have no interest in shoving this piece of technology down your throat if it's not the right piece of technology, whether that's an other piece of Microsoft you can bespoke develop in Microsoft, or whether it's a third-party system. You can feel free to knock yourself out with those. This isn't right. And that's also where scalability comes in. Definitely has a future. It'll be interesting to see how the future goes. There are other third-party low-code platforms, such as Mendix, for instance, which has been around, which has done some great stuff. But Microsoft is really the only full ecosystem out there with the capability. Other ones are low-code platforms, but in terms of security, in terms of office productivity tools, in terms of bespoke dev, it there's no other tech provider out there that does the entire ecosystem.
Agreed. Agreed. And I genuinely feel like that's why people gravitate towards the Power Platform in general, because they're already wedded to Microsoft, and I feel like that gives you a really good bridge to utilize a lot of these tools. EY, please tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but you've had multiple roles. Like as you mentioned, you've been a contractor. I believe now you're full time. Is that right? You're
Yes.
full time work. You've had your own businesses. I believe you had a few when I saw on LinkedIn. So I feel like after COVID, a lot of traditional values about work went out the window. Like people realized that their jobs really and truly aren't safe. Your company will kind of get rid of you once they don't need you anymore. And I feel like that was always the case, but people realized it a bit more after COVID. So what do people need to know about the different kind of roles that they can take throughout their careers? So let's say we've got full-time, we've got having your own business, you've got being a contractor, being a freelancer. What have you learned from those experiences, and what are some of the key differences that people should look out for?
So the first main thing that I'd say is not everybody is cut out for every type of role. Some people much prefer to be a contractor, whether that's as a lone contract or as part of a small contracting outfit, and that suits them. Some people choose to be in a very large partner and love that, large organizations, and love the politics and the rest of it that comes with it, because let's admit that, there is just that. It's not just about how good a solution you're doing, it's also about the politics and the people around. So not everybody is cut out, and sometimes it does take some tasting out of different roles to work out what is best for the person. Some people like stability and they stay with an internal role. Consulting, you're going to be talking to clients, and talking to clients is a double-edged sword, right? They could love you, they could absolutely hate you, and that could be the same person on two conversations on the same day, right? But you're being billed as a resource. They don't like you, they don't see value, then you could be pulled from the project. And let's face it, in the consulting space, it's about utilization, usually, unless you're particularly senior and then you're on a non-billable role. You need to ensure you keep your utilization up for it. And I think generally it's at least about 75, 80% or more across most major consultancies. So it used to be people would travel, as a consultancy, you had the 3, 4, 5 day rule about, you'll be on site, you'll be away for a number of nights and need to do that. Now, that's mostly not the case anymore. Occasional, it will depend on where you are in the world and which, what your role is and which partner you're working for. But generally, that's relaxed quite a lot. So you may occasionally I go onto client side probably once every week or so for a bit. Different organizations will have different stuff, and it's about the culture fit. Some people like being on site with client in a way. Some people don't. And obviously, there's family life as well. If, you've got pets or, hobbies or family around, these all are an influencing factor. So when trying to work out, and I mentor some junior people in the space out of some of the academy programs, and I say this to them, I say, you could go work for an end user. This is, considerations. You could do your own thing. If you're very junior, it's very difficult to start off doing your own thing. You normally need to get experience somewhere else, or you could go into the consulting space. And again, you need to weigh up the pros and the cons and maybe try something out and see if you like it or not. You can always switch from a large partner to a small partner or vice versa, or, find something internal, or after a couple of years decide actually you're happy with it, you want to go contracting. So
Interesting.
unfortunately, there is no easy answer. Different people are cut out different ways, and sometimes it does require us to test things out.
And would you say, being a contractor, I feel like you're getting a bit closer to running a business in the sense of, at least compared to full-time, how close are you to doing your own thing as a contractor? Because you are technically on a contract. So what are some of the intricacies that you realized when you became a contractor that you didn't know before you got into it?
You need to be comfortable at reading legal contracts and understanding clauses for it. And I turn around to people generically in life and say, you don't need to be a contractor. If you're renting property, you've got a landlord, you need to understand your tenant rights. I have friends and I've helped them with stuff over the years because people just don't understand. So you need to be happy with the legalese and with understanding what you are required to do and how you're required to do it. Notice periods, very, very important, right? How can you walk away if it's not gone right? you don't feel it's going right. The whole, if you're an independent contractor, running an independent, a sole person as a business, it's lightweight. You will have financials to deal with. You need a bank account. You'll need a bit of company formation paperwork. You need to file taxes and handle, any benefits or insurances or other stuff needed. Time tracking and, submitting timesheets. But that, generally that's quite straightforward. Obviously the more clients you have at one point, if you're not doing full-time contracting on a single job, if you're running 2 or 3 jobs at a time, that gets a bit more complex. Just ensure that you are delivering quality work. Ensure that you're raising any risks to to whoever it is on the project team, and that you cover yourself for it, that you're not blamed for stuff that other people are doing because your contractor, it's easiest to blame. But provide value for money, but very importantly, be able to understand contracts, because that is what is defining with it. Now, you could be really good and get yourself your own contracts in terms of finding clients, or you could go through recruiters. And again, if you're going through recruiters, find good recruiters that you trust to find those contracts for you. But once you've rolled over a couple of them and you start getting a name for it, clients will want you to continue, or you won't have a problem, using them as a reference for new projects.
Yeah. EY, can you care too much about your job?
You can definitely work too much. I think care is a matter of perception. You have people who will go, okay, I've got a 9 to 5, but I'm going to work 3 hours beforehand and 4 hours afterwards and I'm not going to bill it because I'm afraid I'm going to get sacked because I'm not performing well enough. So you're doing it out of fear. It is important to care, right? I don't say I go in without a care in the world. It's important to understand, put yourself in the customer's shoes, in the client's shoes. They are paying for you after all. You need to deliver value. But they are your client. You shouldn't get emotionally wrapped up in them. You should understand that this is a business, this is professional, and at the end of the day, you can be deployed into another project. You could be moved across. So people do get invested too much, or they have fears and concerns. If you're on at night time, busy looking at YouTube because you found something which you wanted to learn how it works, that's fine. That's, L&D, learning and development, though I do say that all employees should provide it some L&D time. Anyway, for it, you should be able to get a certain percentage of time for L&D. But, it's important, to have that balance. I always say, ideally you should be in the position where a job is something where you are incidentally paid for what you enjoy doing. If you are absolutely fearful, then possibly you are in the wrong place, the wrong environment, or the wrong role. And you should find somebody to help you find the right place or the right role for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. In my research, I realized how interesting you are. You own a motorbike, you skydive. That's already like 10 times cooler than things I do. So, why do you do those things? Why do you put yourself at risk?
So skydiving, unfortunately, no longer doing that, but yes, used to. Interesting fact, actually, in the UK, now this statistic is actually a few years out of date, but it doesn't flex that much. In the UK, there are approximately 3,500 to 4,000 active skydivers in the skydiving community. That's independent people who have qualified as a skydiver. We're not talking about people who've gone a tandem jump. Of those, over 70% of those work in IT in one function or another. I did a poll some years back amongst I was curious about quite a few hundred of them.
Love that.
And it was obviously it's the IT is just so middle of the road and relaxing that you need to do something a bit exciting.
Yeah.
The motorbike, I had a car license before I had a motorbike license, but I owned a motorbike before I got a car because I needed to get around. And it was cheap and cheerful, and it was easy when running an IT support company to get to customers because I could filter through traffic. That's why I got the motorbike. And at the back of my mind, it was sort of something I'd always wanted to do. I had a couple of friends with it, so decided to, and then got the motorbike. Skydiving was one of those thrill things that, again, was on my list of things. People say to me, have I ever thought about wanting to fly an aeroplane? And I go, no. I like going on an aeroplane. Admittedly, now as I'm older, it's a bit boring. You get on it, you're like, why can't I be there already? But I had no interest in piloting or, getting my private pilot license, the PPL. Skydiving was something on my list for a long time, and then I went and I did it. And yeah, it was really thrilling and exciting. It's pushing you to your limits.
Mm. And do you feel like it's helped you as an individual, as a person throughout your life, kind of taking almost a risk, but not really a risk, but, pushing yourself to your limits?
You need to push yourself to your limits at times, and you need to push through the limits at times to see what you're really capable of. I was watching a documentary on the US Navy SEALs recently, and it talks about how, they'll have 100 in a class and 4 will graduate over the 6 months, because you think you have limits, and it's only when you surpass them you realize that actually those were artificial limits you imposed on yourself. I'm not saying everything is right. If you're trying to fight gravity by walking out of a 3rd-story window, right, that's not your limit. That is gravity. You will fall.
Right.
And it's how we progress. We get bigger opportunities for it. We work out our skills. We advance our skill sets. Motorbike, I would say, is quite a risk stuff. The skydiving is a bit more risky, but actually the statistics of it are really, really safe. Statistically, you are more likely to get hit by a car crossing the road than you are to having an accident on a motorbike or getting an injury when skydiving. Albeit that I have had both over time. So it's you do need to take risks at time. If I recall, if I think back to my very, very, very early days in my career, I remember picking up a senior person from the train station one evening when off-site at a client, and because he had just come in and brought him to the hotel, and he said, EY, I was on the call earlier for it, and you could have said this to the customer. And he proceeded to tell me what he thought I could have said to the customer that was, on the call. And I went, well, yes, but I didn't know. And he goes, but if you had a thought about it, as long as you could back it up, you go away and you research it, and therefore you're in control of the facts at that point. It's a slight risk to take. Show that you know a little bit about it, and you'll go ahead and research it. I mean, nowadays I tell clients, I don't know, I'll go away and look it up, right? I don't. But you do need to risk stuff at times, but it's a matter of what you decide to risk and when you decide to risk.
Yeah, having
and
that
that will
intuition.
really, really vary and depend from time to time.
Absolutely. EY, there's a segment I've started to do in this show, and you're the second person I'm asking this, but it's something that I think about a lot, and I've thought about for years, and it's around happiness. Very original. But I'm going to ask all of my guests, including you, what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness is tricky. We are all pursuing it. We generally don't necessarily know what it means. We can be happy we are doing well in our role. We are rewarded. We are advanced in role. But if we have families, how are we doing with our families? Are our families good? Can we get on well with them? Are we giving enough time to them? Are we overspending on it? There is a balance in life, and I will freely admit that I am not the best at this balance for it. I'm trying to get better. I have a mentor of mine coaching me through stuff for it at the moment. She's amazing. What I should say happiness is that when you go to bed at night, which should not be too late, you shouldn't have anything weighing on your mind, any worries, any concerns. You shouldn't be dreading waking up the next day. You should be able to review what you've done in the day and gone, something, there were some challenges. Some stuff went better, some stuff didn't. But overall, it was a positive, it was a good day. And you should be able to wake up in the morning feeling refreshed. Because if you're not happy, you're not going to wake up feeling refreshed and feeling ready to face the day ahead. That to me is what I would describe happiness as, a more generic concept of being.
Yeah. I love that, because and this is more of a personal story that I haven't shared before, so the people who have stayed to the end of the podcast get to hear it. But for years, I think it was about 3 years, I suffered with chronic acid reflux when I went to bed. And it sounds nasty and it sounds a bit weird, but it's true. Like, I would go to sleep in the night and I would wake up because I'd feel something in my throat and I feel like I'm choking, and I wouldn't be able to sleep until maybe 6 a.m. and then I'd have about 3 hours and then I'd wake up and try and do my day. I spoke with my girlfriend's dad, and this was actually only about 6 or 7 months ago, maybe a bit less. And he told me that he suffers in the same way, but in a bit of a different way, less physical. He just can't sleep. So I started to do things that were better for me. I started to get a bit more exercise. I started to meditate just to tone down that stress in the night. And slowly, I suffered for years with this. Slowly, the reflux went away, and now it's gone. And I couldn't be happier with that. So yeah, thank you for that insight, EY. And I couldn't attain to that more. I think if you can go to bed knowing that you did your best, and wake up knowing that you're going to give it your all, that is a pretty nice place to be.
Great.
So yeah, keep it going, everyone. Love that. EY, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much. I always like to have a little segment at the end here, roll out the red carpet, let the people know what you're up to. What are you doing? Where can they find you?
Where can they find me? So I'm on all major social media platforms. You alluded to the motorbike, right? So my moniker is the CRM Ninja. If you put it into any major search engine, I am the first result.
Love it.
In fact, possibly by the time that this goes live, because I'm not sure exactly when this will be aired, that I've just copyrighted. I've just put copyright on it, on the logo for it, across 5 or 6 different categories. So I will be able to put the little R next to it as a registered trademark for it, which will be fun. And we'll see how many people see that. So I blog, not as much as I used to, but around. I'm at community events in the UK. I'm at a load of international major conferences as well. I'll be at the European Power Platform Conference in Vienna in June. I will be at some others as well during the year for it. If you're at a conference, I generally wear a conference jacket. It's got a massive logo in the back with the CRM Ninja on it. It's my conference hoodie. I've got my awards and other stuff on the sleeves. So yeah, feel free to come up and say hi if you want to reach out digitally, virtually, LinkedIn, Twitter, or X as it's called. I'm on that. I'm on, Blue Sky, whatever it's called.
Blue Sky.
Yeah,
That's the one.
I'm on Blue Sky as well, though I don't use it massively. So, feel free, reach out. More than happy to chat and see what I can do to help.
Absolutely. And I can attain to that. EY is very generous with his time. So thank you so much for this. And if you do use his logo, he will sue you. So don't do that. Thank you so much for your time, EY. And we will wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for listening in. And I appreciate your time. Take it easy, EY.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come on.
My pleasure.